Hey guys, hello and welcome back to another Star Wars video. So, we're supposed to be getting a second Mandalorian and Grogu trailer later this week, but in the meantime we do have a couple of interesting Star Wars news tidbits, and I want to begin with something that I found hilarious. This concerns Kathleen Kennedy's contribution to the Acolyte. We don't really think of her as a creative type, but we know with all of these shows that she produces on, she's on set. She makes suggestions, maybe the odd change, and in this case, her so-called contribution to the Acolyte is something that makes me feel very vindicated about, because it proves something I said 2 years ago, that those who worked on the show didn't seem very aware of the wider High Republic. So why do I say this? Apparently Kathleen Kennedy was the person who suggested the Jedi wear lighter robes than the ones that we saw in the prequel trilogy. This comes from Kristen Baver's Art of the Acolyte, and it reveals that Kathleen Kennedy made one crucial visual change. So they say as the creative team worked to establish a visually distinct period, one that is set a century before the Phantom Menace, costume designer Jennifer Bryan recalls that Kennedy raised a crucial concern, that Jedi costumes had become visually too monotonous. And according to Bryan, Kennedy pointed to a very specific place where this problem was very obvious. And she said, quote, "Every time I go into toy departments and I see Jedi action figures, they're always beige and off-white. They look kind of bland on the shelves." And then they say Kathy's note was simple: add more colour. Rather than reinvent the iconic Jedi silhouette, focus on enhancing costumes through palette, texture, and details, while preserving the familiar shape audiences associate with the Jedi. I have so many questions. First and foremost, as the president of Lucasfilm at the time, was Kathleen Kennedy oblivious to the existence of the High Republic? Didn't she realize that Jedi robes were already lighter, an initiative which existed before the Acolyte? And another question, did Leslye Headland intend the Jedi robes to be darker like in episodes 1, 2, and 3? Was she trying to move away from the High Republic as the show is set later in the era? Or is this something they were already going to do without Kathleen Kennedy's input? Now, in all fairness, the costume designer does kind of hint that she does know that High Republic Jedi already exist, because she says, quote, "I saw they had started to put some colour in." Now, some fans interpret this as being from artwork from Lucasfilm Publishing, the High Republic novels and so on, while others think that she's talking about early costuming in the show, early designs. So when she says they started to put some colour in, she might just be talking about in the context of the Disney Plus series. And I completely understand that the Acolyte is set at the end of the High Republic. It's still very clear before episode 1, this is a time of power, of peace, expansion, and institutional confidence. But like I said, and I've been saying this since the show came out, it didn't feel like the High Republic. Now my take, if I were in charge of the costuming in the show, and keep in mind, I'm just spitballing as a Star Wars fan, I have no experience in the industry, I think what those people do is amazing, but just as someone who understands visual imagery and symbolism in the Star Wars franchise, I would have gone for a hybrid. I would have made the colours a bit darker than the High Republic. It's more of an orangey hue, rather than it being yellows and whites, but I would have made it somewhere in between the High Republic look and the prequel look. It's a compromising middle ground that screams the start of the darkness and institutional decay. Not fully in the browns and deep tans yet, but slowly moving in that direction. It's not as vibrant and as happy as the start of the High Republic. By the time of the prequel trilogy, the Jedi had much less to celebrate. Unrest was brewing across many star systems, and the Jedi didn't have the numbers and galactic reach that they once did. High Republic Jedi were fighters, explorers, and leaders, maintaining outposts in far-flung regions. By the time you get to the Phantom Menace, the days of optimism about galactic expansion had come to an end. And as George Lucas said, the prequel Jedi were designed to resemble an order of monks, in contrast to the greater individuality of Jedi during the High Republic. With only a couple of exceptions, like the way George Lucas had Anakin look, they were dressed pretty plainly. Certain Jedi incorporated elements of their own culture like the Mirialans, but generally speaking most Jedi wore standard brown, cream or tan-coloured robes. And even if Leslye Headland was going to have them wear darker robes, you would think the rationale from the Lucasfilm president would be that they wore lighter robes in the books and the comics, and it's right there on the front cover. But for Kathy to talk about action figures and toy shops, that's a really bizarre reason. And if we did get multiple seasons of the show, I wonder if the Jedi robes would have gotten darker as time went on. But you have to figure, credit where it's due, Leslye Headland already knew to do this. She claims to be a Star Wars mega fan, not a Star Wars meg fan, but she reads the books, but it's Kathy's comments that have me puzzled. Because Star Wars fans like to say, Kathy is the one to blame for so many Disney Star Wars failures, and one of those that is highly cited is the High Republic. It wasn't as successful as Lucasfilm had hoped, but it doesn't seem like Kathy gives a toss about it, which doesn't surprise me because she's always been more of a movie person. Same with the animated stuff. If you listen to some of her comments from Star Wars Celebration, she never seems as bothered about the Bad Batch, the Clone Wars, Rebels, but for the live action shows and films, she's hands-on, even if it's just as someone overseeing the project or as a producer. She might have been involved in the early stages, getting the writers together and the authors, but creatively speaking, Kathy doesn't seem to have much say in all of this. Because even when they were making the Acolyte, the High Republic was already a very established part of the Star Wars universe. This wasn't anything new. But this just proves exactly what I've been saying. I said this when the show aired, and I'll say it again today. The Acolyte was treated as entirely separate, and the last time I said this, I said it in reference to Venestra Rowe. She is completely different in this show compared to those earlier books. And I know she's older and supposedly wiser during the Acolyte. This is at the very end of the High Republic. And look, I've heard all of the arguments. I get the nuances that this is long after Starlight Beacon, the Jedi Order is starting to kind of collapse, become more corrupt, and the Jedi are in a very different place compared to the earlier phases. But it's kind of crazy that the Lucasfilm president, or should I say, the Lucasfilm ex-president, doesn't know this about the Jedi during the High Republic. And so now, my dear friends, on to another big update. But I do just need to say, this isn't the first time we've heard about this. The first report of the exact same story broke over a year ago. Essentially, Natalie Portman filmed some scenes for the Kenobi show, but they were cut by Lucasfilm. Now obviously Padme is dead at this point, so it would have been in flashbacks. And now we have the added tidbit that her scenes were connected to the emotional throughline of the prequel trilogy. So my guess is Padme flashbacks in the final duel in episode 6 between Vader and Obi-Wan. Probably during that sequence when Obi-Wan was stuck under some rocks, when he was thinking about Leia and Qui-Gon, or perhaps right at the end, when Obi-Wan splits Vader's mask in half. Maybe there was some deleted dialogue where Obi-Wan tries to appeal to Anakin, trying to appeal to his old friend emotionally. Now at best, the rumor is pretty unstable, not because of the source, it came from Jeff Snyder, but based on who he says he heard it from, it was someone outside of his usual scoop circle. And he also maintains, despite rumors that Natalie's gonna feature in Ahsoka Season 2, she isn't. No one reliable has corroborated this. Very similar situation to Liam Neeson appearing. There were rumors we're gonna see Qui-Gon's Force Ghost, but that's also very questionable. As for Ewan McGregor, that one is a bit more solid. We've heard from a couple of people close to Lucasfilm that there are plans for Obi-Wan in Dave Filoni's second season. And here's the thing about Padme and Ahsoka. It could make for great fan service, but flashbacks alone might be a bit disappointing, because Padme represents the life Anakin might have had. Peace, love. It's why I think a lot of fans like the idea of her being some kind of Abeloth apparition. Abeloth uses Padme's likeness to maybe fight Ahsoka or even Anakin's ghost, which we've heard is a credible rumor that Anakin's spirit is going to use his lightsaber. But that said, my dear friends, share your thoughts on all of today's news in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this one, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and may the Force be with you always.